Over the past year, students and families suffered because they did not receive the quality education they deserved, especially those who could least afford to miss out. Do not let this happen again, and we need your help to impact education today for tomorrow. Senate Bill 1968, House Bill 4537 are in the Texas legislature waiting to be heard in committee. Your support is vital. This legislation, if passed, would provide families opportunities to educate children in the way they need to succeed in life. We need to flood our leaders with calls to support family educational programs. Go to txdirectory.com for phone numbers and voice your support to Governor Abbott, Governor Patrick, and Speaker Phelan. Support Bill 1968 and House Bill 4537. Support a child's education today for a better tomorrow.
Political ad paid for by Mark DeRazio, State Republican Executive Committee, Senate District 25.
You press harder. We can do this. But if you haven't gotten Senate yet, now is the time. And with that, over to Dr. Walensky for an important update and what our progress means for Americans.
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be back with you today. Let's begin with an overview of the data. Yesterday, CDC reported more than 34,200 new cases of COVID-19. Our 7-day average is about 36,800 cases per day. This represents yet another decrease of about 23% from our prior 7-day average. And every day, with daily cases continuing to fall, we remain encouraged by these positive trends. The 7-day average of hospital admissions is 4,100. Again, another terrific sign with another back-to-back decrease of 12% from the previous 7-day period. And 7-day average daily deaths have also declined to 587 per day. Today, I have several exciting announcements to share with you. First, since becoming CDC director, I have seen firsthand the current frail state of the public health infrastructure in this country. I'm committed to upgrading the public health system so the nation is ready for whatever comes next. With this in mind, today we are announcing the upcoming release of $7.4 billion in funding from the American Rescue Plan to hire, train, and support public health workers across the country, reflective of the diversity within the communities they serve. Over half of the money being released, $4.4 billion, will support states and localities, creating tens of thousands of new jobs in communities across America, expanding our overall public health departments with new hires to support their COVID-19 efforts. And $3 billion will be focused on preparing these same jurisdictions for future pandemics and to build a public health workforce for the future. Though many threats have increased in complexity and scale in recent years, our nation's public health workforce has gotten smaller. This support will immediately add more staff in health departments across the country. It will add school nurses to K-12 schools to support safe reopening and operations and support vaccinations and vaccines are authorized for younger people. It will expand the number of CDC epidemic intelligence service officers, our elite disease detectives, to respond to local outbreaks and help curb the pandemic. It will expand public health career paths, recruit and train a diverse group of future public health leaders, and launch a Public Health AmeriCorps to recruit a strong, diverse, and highly skilled workforce that is ready to respond. And it will create new programs intended to increase staffing at our nation's laboratories and build preparedness for the future. We are really excited about what this support will mean for our nation's public health capability now and into the future. Second, last night I endorsed the recommendations of CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, making the Pfizer vaccine available to anyone who is 12 years and older. I want to thank the ACIP for reviewing the science and providing their recommendations on the safety and efficacy of the vaccines in adolescents. This is an important step forward in our efforts to vaccinate as many people as possible and to stop the pandemic. And finally, I want to provide you an update regarding CDC's guidance for fully vaccinated people. Over the course of the pandemic, we are continuously gathering data and evidence to inform our guidance and decision-making. We now have numerous reports in the literature that demonstrate the safety and real-world effectiveness of the authorized vaccines. On this slide, there are 3 recently published studies, one from Israel published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, on the top, and two from the United States, both published in CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, which all show that COVID-19 vaccines work. In Israel, there was a demonstrated 97% vaccine effectiveness against symptomatic and 86% effectiveness against asymptomatic infection in over 5,000 healthcare workers. In the United States, vaccines were 90% effective against any infection in nearly 4,000 healthcare workers, and 94% effective against hospitalizations from COVID-19 in an evaluation across 24 hospitals in 14 states. Additionally, we are accumulating data that our authorized vaccines are effective against the variants that are circulating in this country. On this slide, you can see a study published just last week that demonstrates how effective the Pfizer vaccine is against the common circulating variants in the United States, B117, as well as other variants like B1351. Additional studies confirm that the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines are also effective against circulating variants. Finally, we know that in the rare event that people get infected after a vaccine, the resulting infection is more likely to have a lower viral load, be shorter in duration, and likely less risky of transmission to others. Considering all of these, the data on vaccine effectiveness, the science on their ability to protect against circulating variants, and our growing understanding of the low risk of transmission to others, combined with universal access to vaccines for those 12 and older, today, CDC is updating our guidance for fully vaccinated people. Anyone who is fully vaccinated can participate in indoor and outdoor activities, large or small, without wearing a mask or physical distancing. If you are fully vaccinated, you can start doing the things that you had stopped doing because of the pandemic. We have all longed for this moment when we can get back to some sense of normalcy. Based on the continuing downward trajectory of cases, the scientific data on the performance of our vaccines, and understanding of how the virus spreads, that moment has come for those who are fully vaccinated. Now, if you are immune compromised, you will most definitely want to talk to your doctor before giving up your mask. Also,
same question to you. Would you allow Chinese firms to build critical U.S. infrastructure?
No, I would not. And I spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader had by the time we left office. This is a guy who doesn't have a democratic with a small d bone in his body. This is a guy who is a thug who, in fact, has 1 million Uyghurs in reconstruction camps, meaning concentration camps. This is the guy who you see what's happening right now in Hong Kong. And this is a guy who I'm able to convince to join the international agreement at the Paris Agreement, because guess what? They need to be involved. You cooperate and you can also dictate exactly what they are. When in fact they said we're going to set up a no-fly zone, that you can't fly through our zone. He said, what do you expect me to do when I was over there? I said, we're going to fly right through it. We flew B-1 bombers through it. We got to make it clear. They must play by the rules.
Thank you, Mr.
Period,
President.
period.
A real movement forward on the creation of a Biden commission to investigate something that, like the 9/11 Commission and the Iraq Study Group. More than 4 months after the January 6th riots, House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Benny Thompson and the ranking member on Homeland Security, John Katkow, who voted to impeach the president, by the way, announced today they reached an agreement on a bill that would allow for the formation of a group of 10 folks to help investigate the events of January 6th and the security failures in the days leading up to it. The announcement comes just days after some House Republicans minimized, defended, and even denied some of the basic facts of what happened on January 6th. And it also comes in the same day that House Republicans elected Congresswoman Elise Stefanik to replace Liz Cheney as the number 3 in the House leadership because of Cheney's criticism of Trump's election lies. That, of course, led to the January 6th riots. I'm joined now by the lead negotiator on this deal, the Democrats' chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson. So, Congressman, first of all, walk me through who is it It's a 10-person commission, 5 appointed by Republicans, 5 appointed by Democrats. Who is eligible to be on this commission and who is not eligible to be on this commission?
Well, I'll make it easy. No sitting member of Congress is eligible to participate on the commission. We want to look at law enforcement, civil rights, other individuals who might have an interest in what went on January 6th, but specifically no member of Congress can sit.
And there's subpoena power. It is what happens when there is a deadlock on a subpoena. You know, if it's either 5-5 or the chairman and the vice chairman can't agree.
Well, you know, it's a shared responsibility. It's a bipartisan commission. I'm anticipating very little challenges with respect to getting access to information. I've personally supported the formulation of the commission, and I think every other chairperson or agency head in this administration would be amenable to providing whatever information that we deem necessary the commission might need.
So you guys have come to this agreement. Are you right? This now gets written as legislation and just brought to the floor, or will this still need to be haggled with a bit?
Well, we go to rules on Tuesday morning with the bill.
Got it.
And we hope to get a favorable ruling from rules and go straight to the floor. And ultimately, by the close of business on Thursday, we will have done our job in the House, and then it's up to the Senate.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics.
We're going to make it clear that anyone collecting unemployment who is offered a suitable job must take the job or lose their unemployment benefit. There are a few COVID-19 related exceptions, so that people aren't forced to choose between their basic safety and a paycheck. But otherwise, that's the law. I know there's been a lot of discussion since Friday's report, that people are being paid to stay home rather than go to work. Well, we don't see much evidence of that. That is a major factor. We don't see that. Look, it's easy to say the line has been, because of the generous unemployment benefits, that it's a major factor in labor shortages. Americans want to work. Americans want to work. As my dad used to say, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity, your place in the community, being able to look your kid in the eye and say everything's going to be okay. I think the people who claim Americans won't work, even if they find a good and fair opportunity, underestimate the American people.
Welcome to Tommy Nation Politics. Free thinking, innovative, progressive, independent media. Reach out, www.tommynationpolitics.com. If you have any messages or want to collaborate in our experience, please don't hesitate. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/TommyNationPolitics. This is the Unmasking.
Turn it up.
guys? It's Tuesday. The new DD guys on face masks reshape the political dimensions of the COVID debate. Face House to acquiesce to a new conventional wisdom and social norms. When the news broke that Americans no longer had to wear masks, if they were fully vaccinated, President Joe Biden made his move. He took off his mask, and so did the Republicans sitting across from negotiating infrastructure deal at the White House. In the Capitol, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell shed his mask and announced, "Free at last! Free at last! How much? You might be free." Well. He also said, we feel naked. I feel naked every time anybody even tries that we're a free country. We're not. We are sharecroppers living in a free land. We're not a free country. Combination politics. Guys, I hope everyone's had a Tuesday. That was Dean Biggins, royalty free, no copyright. I do want to pimp out his music because and Curious Beats, by the way. Curious Beats. Even though they give me their music for free, I just want to let y'all know there's some sons of bitches that have good music. We're streaming on Trovo, we're streaming on Twitch. I just got a message from Twitch. Look at this. You want to be famous? Buy followers and viewers. Can I buy you guys? We can buy our politicians. Can I buy y'all? I don't know. I don't really want to try. I don't like to play those games. I don't like to be conventional wisdom and social norms. I like to just be me. That way I don't have to remember what I said or who I fucked over. You know. I can just be me. What else is streaming on? On YouTube. The chat's open. Let me know what you got here, okay? Anyway, guys, the unmasking. The Biden administration has approached this pandemic with extreme caution. Each step of the way, urging Americans to maintain health precautions, even as vaccine access ramped up. The new guidelines announced by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Thursday. It offered America its most tangible hope, or its most tangible hope yet. That there would be finally a return to normalcy. A return to normalcy, guys. What's the normal? I tell you what the normal is, guys. The normal is no living wage. The normal is no legalized marijuana. The normal is the politicians are owned by 1% that own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. The normal is 10 cities. The normal is corporate mass overlords buying politicians, throwing you under the bus, quarterly growth period. Every stock trade. The normal is a volatile market, a stock market. The normal is sucking. It's a new normal. It's a return to normal, guys. Aren't y'all excited about that? Are y'all excited about your return to your crappy lives, crappy jobs, no minimum wage increases? I swear to God, neoliberalism, guys. It's amazing. It makes you get down on your knees and kiss the ground. The crumbs are coming from. It's crazy. I swear to God. Are y'all you guys kissing the ground that you can take your masks off? This is a sign. We're returning back to normal. My question that I posed tonight is this. Why? Who, where, when, why, and how. So this question mainstream doesn't answer Joe Biden's president. The question that drives us. What is the purpose? What is the reason? What is the agenda? Find that out tonight. I hope you guys enjoy. Am I glitching, guys? Restream. I just want to let y'all know while I'm failing at my connections. I just want you guys to know that I'm being sponsored by Restream. This is Restream. Share audio. You can do restreams on here. They suck though. If you don't pay maximum capitalist. Restream has you guys suck. That's the reason why thing is glitching. I guess it won't let me. Won't let me do this. Restream. You won't let me. That's nice. Try one more time.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today?
Mehdi Hassan had on a representative from the Israeli government to talk about what's currently going on in Israel and Palestine. Take a look. He does a pretty decent job calling out his nonsense.
Given 500 Palestinian children were killed in the 2014 Gaza war, according to both the UN and human rights groups, how worried should we be tonight that Israel is about to launch another full-scale assault, maybe an invasion of Gaza?
Thank you, Mehdi, for inviting me. I think the question you're asking is something to refer to Hamas spokespeople, because eventually the reality on the ground is that quiet will be responded by quiet. If Hamas is going to continue threatening Israeli civilians, firing rockets indiscriminately towards Israeli towns, then we're going to be forced to respond and respond forcefully. And by the way, this is not just Israel. Any country in the world would have done the same if their cities were attacked by organizations.
I mean, any country in the world, most countries in the world are not in charge of a decades-long military occupation. But you mentioned Hamas rocket strikes. I think we can both agree that Hamas firing rockets at civilian buildings is wrong. Can we both agree on that? I think we can agree on that, right? That's common ground for us.
Hamas firing rockets at civilian population is totally wrong. There is fully agreement with us on that.
Agreed. You got me on. We're 100%. We agree. And yet today you had a 13-story residential apartment building in Gaza targeted by the Israeli Air Force destroyed. How is that not anything other than a war crime, a deliberate attack on a civilian target?
You know, I think it's actually very disfortunate that people are trying to equate the IDF response to Hamas as a terrorist organization. Israel acts in accordance with the international law. We target only Hamas targets, and every target that we're firing at is being chosen very carefully. We do that with accordance of international law in order to minimize civilian casualties and collateral damage. And you know what? We're the only country and the only organization, the only ones in the Middle East that actually care about international law. Hamas doesn't care. Palestinian Islamic Jihad doesn't care. And every loss of life is unfortunate. I agree 100%.
You flattened. I mean, we don't have time to get into an argument about international law. Suffice to say that most human rights groups criticize Israel for violating human rights law, and they criticize Hamas. But you leveled an apartment building. I think you gave them a 1-hour warning to get out of the building. Do you think that's in line with humanitarian law to bomb a civilian apartment building in Gaza?
You know, Hamas is using the Palestinians in Gaza as human shields. They're firing rockets at Israel from within centers of civilian population.
You need to understand, they say this exact same thing every time there's a conflict, and then after the fact, when people look at the casualties, we get the reality. So the last time they did this in 2014, and by the way, a top Israeli official once called this cutting the grass, making the Palestinians fall in line. In 2014 Operation Protective Edge, 80% of Palestinians killed by Israeli strikes are civilians, UN report says. So this is what happens. Every time Israel attacks a number of civilian targets, in Gaza, and they go, whoa, 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 what? No, it's totally within international law, bro, because Hamas is using that to store weapons, and they're also using human shields. Now, by the way, I just want you to think about this in any other context. If you heard there was some sort of terrorist gang that had taken over your kid's school, and the police decided, we're just going to bomb the whole school, would you be like, okay? I mean, what are they going to do? The terrorist group has my kid as their human shield. So they had to do what they had to do. They had to drop the bombs. You would never accept that. You'd say, what, are you fucking crazy? You have to care about the civilians first and foremost. That's what you have to do. But for some reason, Israel makes this argument like it's convincing. Like, oh, sure, they may have been using human shields, but we had to bomb the civilians anyway because we have to get the bad guys. What? So the argument is, what are we supposed to do? We have to bomb. They gave us no choice. But you do have a choice. You decided to bomb and also kill civilians. That's what you did. Then they bullshit. Oh, yeah, well, we dropped pamphlets that said, you know, hey, we're going to bomb this in a little bit, and we gave people an hour to get out, so what more do you want from us? I want you to not violate international law. And by the way, it is untrue that this doesn't violate international law. Of course it violates international law. You're not allowed to target civilian infrastructure, period. And they always do. And then we always come back after and find out, oh my God, 80% of the Palestinians killed were civilians. What are you doing? They don't care about the Palestinian civilian casualties. They don't care. And then I want to give you some more numbers the last time this happened. So you would think, the way everybody talks about this, you would think like, oh my God, there's extreme carnage, and it's either equal carnage between the Palestinians and Israelis, or the Israelis are the ones getting slaughtered, and so Israel has to respond like this. Last time this happened in 2014, more than 2,100 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip. 2,100 Palestinians, 80% of them civilians, 500 of them children. How many died on the Israeli side? 66 soldiers and 7 civilians. You have one military that is backed by the most powerful military in human history, that technologically way outpaces the other side. This isn't a war. It's a slaughter. That's what it is. And you cannot target civilian infrastructure on purpose. You just can't. I don't want to hear it. If you're bombing a power plant, if you're bombing a school, if you're bombing an apartment building, I don't want to hear it. You can't do it, and there is no bullshit rationalization after the fact. Oh, we had to do it. Even if Hamas is firing rockets from those places, which, by the way, I don't believe them that that's what's happening, those rockets they land in the middle of a fucking cow field. That's what happens, which is why the civilian casualties on the Israeli side are so low, and it's good that those civilian casualties are low. I actually care about all civilians. But don't bullshit us. Oh my God, a Hamas rocket landed in an open field. Now let's go level an apartment building. Now let's go kill 500 more children and more civilians and level civilian infrastructure. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. And if I was president, I would immediately cut off all subsidies to Israel and immediately cut off all arms to Israel. We gave them, in 2016, we gave them $38 billion. We give them so much funding and military support. And then we sit back as they continue wantonly violating international law. It's an apartheid state. They're doing an illegal occupation. They are expanding settlements as we speak, trying to do evictions from East Jerusalem as we speak, kicking Palestinians out of their own homes. And they're doing an ethnic cleansing. That's what it is. And we still have people bullshitting us right to our face going on TV. Credit to Mehdi Hassan for calling him out. But listen, the bullshit is so thick in real time that people do walk away feeling like, oh, what are you going to do? It's a conflict and both sides have problems and all that. Well, guess what? The younger generation is not buying it. The younger generation is not buying it. They see through this Hasbara from a mile away. And now people are sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinians because it's pretty obvious the power imbalance and what's going on and who's violating international law. And said it before, I'll say it again. The fact of the matter is this. People always say Israel has a right to self-defense. Israel has a right to self-defense. Israel has a right to self-defense. Well, flip that question back on these people. Do Palestinians have a right to self-defense? Now, they probably won't answer that, or they'll give the wrong answer. But the right answer is, of course, yes, they do have a right to self-defense. And the fact of the matter is this. If somebody comes into your home illegally and says, I'm taking everything you have, do you have a right to self-defense in that moment? I think you do. I think you do. And any reasonable person would say yes to that. And so that's the truth they can't bullshit their way out of. You can't do an illegal occupation and expand the settlements and do planned evictions against international law and ethnic cleansing and then, feign outrage when there's some pushback. Can't do it. Can't do it. Cannot do it. Killing civilians is wrong. Full stop. Full stop. That includes when Israel does it. And like we just demonstrated, last time it was 80% civilian casualties, and it will be about the same this time. But they're going to bullshit you to your face as the children killed ticks up, and the civilians killed tick up. And you're watching it happen right now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. So, it's Friday, folks, end of a very interesting week. On the one hand, the Biden administration has had basically nothing but problems this past week. Gas lines, higher prices, some pretty lousy economic numbers, Russia and Iran taking them to the cleaners by throwing every conceivable bomb at Israel. The southern border still open, no fix in sight for that problem. Russian cyber hackers continue to hold up American companies for ransom in order to operate their computers. And even though the CDC tells us to be mask-free indoors and outdoors if you have the vaccine, still confusing behavior in the White House even throws a monkey wrench at that, which should be so easy. Tough week for the Bidens. But on the other hand, folks, we are actually a business show, and consequently, I must report this was a booming week for the stock market. Saying it couldn't care less about the Biden follies. The market was booming yesterday. As of the early results today, it's up around $400. A whole string of numbers, much higher inflation, softer retail sales, over 8 million open jobs that remain unfilled, yet the market keeps rising and rising. And I've always been a believer in the wisdom of the stock market. Mr. Market, it captures all available information. That is to say, the market is always right until it's not. That's the tricky part about the market. Right now, it loves huge quantities of free money from the Fed, huge quantities of free spending from the government, and at least fundamentally, the market rise is backed by record profits. Profits are the mother's milk of stocks. I had a great conversation this morning with an old and dear friend, one of Wall Street's very top investors. He'll be coming on the show next week, by the by. He said, short run, very, very bullish. Longer term, you're facing higher inflation, higher interest rates, and higher taxes, none of which is good for stocks or the economy. So right now, Mr. Market loves the action until it won't. Go figure. President Trump is going to restart his famous rallies around the country beginning in June and July 4th. And we're going to spend some time this evening talking about his messaging. What is he going to say? It's going to be a really important point. Liz Cheney is gone, but is the GOP united? I hope the president remembers his old assistant for economic policy. Remember him, who ran the White House National Economic Council along supply-side free market policy principles. That was me. I sure hope that that's going to be his message. I might even have to give him a call. Love to talk to him anyway. We need him out there to pinpoint all of the many far-left policy mistakes that the Biden crowd is committing. Now, we're going to talk later in the show about why the Green New Deal can't possibly happen along the Biden timeline, because we don't have the resources to transform our energy sector, even if we wanted to. And I don't particularly want to. I don't want to transform it. I can make it technologically better, but I like it just where it is. I don't want a tax assault on investment. I don't want critical race theory. I don't want to cancel culture, wokeism. I don't want open borders, though I love legal immigrants. We have open borders on the South. I don't want massive new social spending that does away with workfare and the dignity of work. I want to remind everybody just how right Senator Tim Scott was when he told President Biden that America is not a racist country. Now, I worked 3 years for President Trump, and we agreed far, far more than we disagreed on key topics. And I'm hoping the former president will stay with the script that I am outlining this evening. If he does, it will be an absolute home run. This great country of ours does not want massive new government spending and taxing. Doesn't want it. Does not want it. Biden was not elected to do it, even though he's gone so far left, he is doing it. And therefore, there has to be a steep political cost for his mistakes. So President Trump could play such a constructive role. And right now, back to our show, I'm still long stocks, nervously. I'm still long supply-side economics.
U.S. workforce gained 266,000 workers last month, that number being far below economists' April forecast projected over 1 million jobs to be added in April.
Professor of economics and co-founder of Democracy at Work, Professor Richard Wolff, joins us now to discuss. Great to see you, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. All right, so this is what they call a gigantic miss, one of the largest divergences between expectations and reality that we've had in decades. What did you make of these numbers?
Everything that's happening to this country at this point is either a huge miss or a miscalculation or a surprise or a shock. Partly we should understand we are still in the stages of one of the worst catastrophes, both in our economy and in our public health system, and at the same time. This is not going to be an easy exit because it's a really serious problem. We got into this craziness about the recovery in which hype after hype told us we were out of the woods, which we all want to be, and it was upward and onward for here. This is not the reality. It's not going to be the reality. People should understand a little bit better that the problems we have are not an easy fix. Let me give one concrete example. We were told yesterday that the inflation rate year over year from last April to this April was over 4%. Well, that's an enormous increase in the cost of everything. And it's going to make the American people buy fewer things because they can't afford to pay those higher prices. And if fewer things are bought, fewer people are going to be hired to produce what can't be sold. So you can see right away the headwinds that are part of the story, why there was this serious miss.
And so one of the things that a lot of people discuss, Professor, is they said that there's too much unemployment, which is creating a labor shortage. What do you make of that argument?
Well, that is junk. I mean, I don't know how to be polite about this. Corporations want people to come back to work at low wages. They want to be able to raise prices, which they're doing, but they don't want to pay higher wages. Why not? Because that makes more profits. If you can raise the price, but you don't have to pay your workers more, there's extra in it for you. And you can't say that because it's ugly and obvious. So you talk about a labor shortage. Well, we teach in economics what all these businessmen and women know. If there's not enough workers and you want to hire more, there's a really easy way to do that. Raise the wages, and then the people will come. Let's remember, the American working class suffered badly over the last 14 months. Lost jobs, lost incomes, used up savings, the extra costs of getting COVID or sickness, et cetera, et cetera. So they need the help that rising wages could give them. And if the business community understood or cared, they wouldn't be suggesting a labor shortage as a none too subtle way to try to get the government to force people back to work without paying higher wages. And the threat to take away the extra unemployment is the coercive mechanism aimed at getting that result.
Yeah, it's all sticks. It's never any carrots to get people back into the workforce. Professor, I'm interested to hear more about your views on the inflation numbers that just came out. Some of the analysis suggested, look, this is where we would have been if we didn't have a big hit last year. Other analysis has suggested essentially this is confined to a few different sectors. This is just a sign of things getting back online and the road being a little bit rocky. What do you think is the significance of these numbers, and where do you think this inflation is originating from?
I think there are several causes. All inflations have multiple causes and never reducible to one thing. Here, I think if I had to focus on something, I would talk about the attempt by the business community to recoup its losses over the last 14 months, all of those associated with workplace closings and fewer shoppings and all the rest of it. And they want to catch up. They want to make good. And so they're going to raise their prices in the hopes that it will stick. The problem is really that the government can't cope with that. The Federal Reserve policies have been premised on the notion that there wouldn't be a rapid inflation. And we're all clear that in the past, the Federal Reserve has not been able to control inflations in an effective way early on. And so there's great anxiety now that this inflation will not be a blip, will not be temporary, will not be over by September, the way some Fed officials have already suggested. It may, because particularly the American working class can't support higher prices, and that may be the discipline that stops them from rising further. But for this moment, we have a lot of impetus. Oil prices are going up. Lots of input prices are going up. That's pushing employers to feel it's a time they can maybe get away with it, and they're going to try to do it. It's socially irresponsible because it makes our economic situation even more tenuous, but it is something to watch very carefully because it is not under control, no matter what officials suggest otherwise.
Yeah.
One last question for you, Professor. Do you think there's a sort of fundamental rethinking by workers of their relationship to employment? There's some signs of shifting industries, going back to school to get different credentials to go into different lines of work. You can see among the sort of professional managerial class, they like their Zoom workplaces, they're cutting back on hours, they're moving to other places where they feel like a work-life balance may be more in line with what they ultimately want. Do you see a sort of like cultural shift going on right now?
Absolutely. And again, it has multiple causes and is taking multiple directions. You see a resurgence of interest in labor unions. It's remarkable how many workers are beginning, even Republican workers, to think about the union as a protection for their own situation. You see a great deal of distrust of the government on the right and the left, and a distrust of the business community as being no longer the kind of unifying or unified force. I think if I had to give an answer, I would say that U.S. capitalism as a system is in very deep difficulty.
Do the rich people cringe and say, don't tell them that, Rob?
Yes. Don't tell people what you know. Right. Keep them poor. So my father was the head of education, PhD, all that stuff. I go home and ask him, said, why don't we learn about money in school? And he looked at me and says, because the government doesn't let us teach that subject. The government tells us what we can teach and what we can't teach. I thought that was strange. And I said, but aren't we going to school to learn about money? He says, no, your job is to get a job. I said, but you get a job to earn money. He goes, no, you're supposed to just get a job. I went, no. Is the purpose of a job to earn money? He goes, you're correct. I said, so why don't I just learn about money? I can skip the job part, you know? And he got flustered and he said, if you want to learn about money, why don't you ask your best friend's father about money? And I said, why? That's Mike. So I asked him. He says, because Mike's father is an entrepreneur. And I said, what are you? He says, I'm an employee. I'm a government employee. And I went, oh, what's the difference? He says, the difference is an entrepreneur must know about money, or they're no longer entrepreneurs. And he says an employee doesn't have to know anything about money, because the government will take care of them, the company will take care of them. So I'm all confused. But I took my dad's advice and I trundled over to Mike's father's office and knocked on his door and I said, hey, I'm here, 9 years old, teach me about money. He says, beat it, kid, you know. But that's where the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad started. And finally, through persistence, my rich dad started teaching me about money on one condition. And that condition was he would never pay me. He says, the moment I pay you, you think like an employee. He says, that's the trap. Entrepreneurs work for free. And now I'm 9 years old, my head's going cracking in half. He says, you never want a paycheck. You understand that, kid? I said, okay, I got it. And he says, well, how do I make money? He says, that's what entrepreneurs figure out. It's like, so how do I learn about money? So he would just break out a Monopoly game board. So I would work for free. I'd pick up cigarette butts, and he had hotels and restaurants, and I would clean and do menial tasks. And as I got older, I started getting into office work and marketing and accounting, and I was an apprentice basically, but I always worked for free. And he would teach me about money, but the way he taught me about money was playing Monopoly. And I finally one day I got upset. I said, well, when are you going to teach me about money? He says, what do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He goes, no. What do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He says, what do you think we're doing? So I don't know. I'm teaching you about money. And then that's when, you have one greenhouse. He says, there's many formulas for great success in money. There's thousands of them. But one of the best ones found on the game of Monopoly. It still is today. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. I said, what? He says, one of the greatest ways to acquire great wealth is playing Monopoly in real life. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. Well, is that all there is? He goes, that's it. And he says, what do you think I'm doing? And I went, I don't know. So then he took me out in houses. And 10 years later, when I was 9, I was now in school in New York, and I come back to Hawaii, and Rich Dad had bought the biggest piece of land smack dab in the middle of Waikiki Beach. And when you go to Waikiki Beach today, you'll see the Hyatt Regency Hotel. That was his hotel.
Just like the game of Monopoly.
Just like the game of Monopoly.
Acquired assets and they became bigger assets.
He just kept what's called an assemblage, because that property wasn't that big at the time, so he had to buy out all the small guys. Because Waikiki was a little dirt water little town. So he'd buy out this shop owner and buy that shop owner. And it took him a while, but he finally assembled this large piece of property. And then he and Hyatt put up this giant hotel. It just sold for $800 million. So that's how I learned about money. I've had financial crashes. I've had people stab me in the back, but they're all good because I grow from it. That's spirituality. Right. People who are afraid of making mistakes, like they teach in school, they don't ever grow. Because spirituality is there's good and there's bad, there's right and there's wrong, there's up and there's down. Most people only want to be right. They only want to be positive. Well, you can't have that. That's not reality. Well, I wasn't poor by most people's standards, but I came from a family with a poor attitude, if you know what I mean. Because rich, poor, middle class, poverty starts with a fundamental attitude. Poverty is passed on. It's taught in your families. And middle class is taught in families. And so the people right now who are sitting at home, who are struggling financially or worried about money or unhappy, they may be making a lot of money, but unhappy with what they're doing, it was probably taught to you. Your super ego was taught, get a job, work hard, or you'll never be rich, or the rich are evil, or whatever. The school system will never teach you about money. The school system was designed to teach you to be an employee, which is important, or a doctor or a lawyer, a specialist, but never about money. And what most people lack is real business knowledge, like accounting, like debt, like taxes. You got to know that stuff, but they don't teach it in school to anybody. So, and then when people ask me, how did your rich dad learn this when your poor dad, a PhD, didn't? And the answer is very simply, my rich dad was again my best friend's father. His father died when he was 13. So his rich dad had this family business at 13 to run. So he had to drop out of school, which was his blessing. This blessing, sometimes the blessing doesn't look like a blessing, but it turned out to be a blessing. And then his teachers became his bookkeeper, his accountant, his attorney, his banker, his real estate agents. So he has what I call real teachers, not these fake teachers in school. You see, most teachers in school, they're out of ethics. They teach subjects they themselves don't practice. I asked the teacher, I said, I'm in my third year of calculus now. It was called strength of materials. I said, am I ever going to use this stuff? He goes, no. I said, why do you teach it? Because I get paid. I said, do you ever use it? He goes, no. And that's why, you have to, in life, one of the things I suggest to people, you got to find a real teacher versus a fake teacher. And a fake teacher is somebody who doesn't do what they teach. And a real teacher is doing what they teach every day. So my accountants, my attorneys, they're in it every single day. That's how I learn, because every day I'm solving problems in my business.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics.